Hello, welcome to Ethos, Pathos, and Logos. The goal by the end of this lesson is that you should be able to identify the examples, different examples of ethos, pathos, and logos. So what are they? Ethos. First, ethos is an appeal to someone or something's character, so like who they are as a person. They try to show themselves as trustworthy, maybe authoritative, like they're an authority figure, or that they share common values or beliefs with the audience. So some examples of how writers use ethos, mentioning personal credentials or professional credentials. So a lot of the times, like the 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Colgate toothpaste, like using those professional credentials to show like, hey, this is a trustworthy product because a lot of dentists like it. Drawing on the established reputation of a person, institution, or brand. So like saying stuff like, we've been around since 1800. You can trust us to get it done because they're so old. Or establishing common ground with the audience, like saying, hey, look, I've been there. We've all been there. This is why we're the best, or this is why you should do this. It's a persuasive technique. They're trying to persuade the audience to either, if it's like a product, to like buy their product, or they're trying to persuade the audience to agree with them, or trying to persuade the audience to take action for something. And ethos is just one of those three different ways. And again, ethos, appealing to their character, trying to show themselves as like trustworthy, an authority, someone to listen to, or like somebody that they have something in common with, sharing common values. A lot of the time, ethos is another example of when like people use athletes or celebrities or well-known people to endorse their product. So like when they get like Peyton Manning on the Papa John's commercials, using a well-known person to say like, hey, this well-known person likes our stuff, you should too. That's an example of ethos. The next one, pathos, is an appeal to their emotions. So using feelings to try to persuade the audience. So like citing dramatic stories about specific individuals, like if you've seen like the mayhem commercials, like Allstate commercials, where it's like protect you from mayhem like me, and they show like a dog running through a wedding cake and knocking over a TV into the tree that falls onto the house, like all this crazy stuff happening. It's appealing to your emotions like, oh, suspense or fear or shock or surprise. That's pathos. A lot of us, when we think of pathos, we think of like the sad dog commercials. It's more than just that. If something makes you feel happy, or it makes you feel like you want something, or makes you feel angry or fearful, that is also pathos. So pathos isn't always just sad and happy. It can be many different things. Choosing words with strong connotations, a reminder on what connotations are. That's the social or just made up definition of things. So like instead of saying, oh, that's so cool, you would say that's lit. That's connotation. So using words with strong connotations equals choosing words that create strong feelings. So using that kind of ties into the last bullet point, using descriptive language to create powerful images. When we're thinking of ads, that's like using emotional music in the background, or happy music, upbeat music in the background. When it's writing, it's using specific words and phrases to get an emotional response out of the reader. Logos, kind of the opposite of pathos. Logos is appealing to logic or reason, using facts, logic, or evidence to persuade the reader. And so the most common way of doing this is citing relevant facts, statistics, and studies, like studies show this, or experts say this, and then providing that logical or evidential information for the reader or the watcher if it's like an ad or something. Explaining the logical chain of reasoning to support a claim, so explaining like how they got from point A to point B to the audience or the reader to show that like kind of logical appeal, like, oh, I'm logical, these are my reasons for doing this, these are the reasons you should listen to me, or these are the reasons you should do what I'm saying. That's logos. Another example of logos, which isn't as commonly thought about, is anticipating counterclaims. So a lot of the time you'll see, especially in advertisements, you'll see some brands talking about like the facts and figures, and then they're like, I know what you're going to say, and then like the opposite, and then they provide a counterclaim. They kind of like stop you before you can argue with them. That's an example of logos, like being prepared. So let's take a look at some like picture examples here. Decide whether each example is ethos, that's the character, trying to be trustworthy or common ground. Pathos is emotion. Logos is logic. So go ahead, pause, and try to think, try to think which example of ethos, pathos, and logos is in which picture. Hopefully you've paused to think about it. Let's just go through them. Number 1, when your child is sick, nothing else matters. Rolex children's cold and flu can help. And then we see like a sad girl laying on her, like probably her mom's lap with her head, a hand over her head, kind of like the same thing that we feel when like we get sick and we check for a fever. This is kind of a trick one. This appeals to 2 things. You probably were stuck between the 2. It definitely appeals to pathos, like especially to mothers or parents in general, that they're trying to get you to relive that feeling of when your child is sick. And so that's its appeal to pathos. It also appeals to ethos, common ground, common values with the audience. Like everybody's been sick before. And then every parent has a child. And so put those 2 things together, we have some common ground. There's ethos. So sometimes you can see 2. I would say for number 1, that's more pathos than ethos, but both of them are definitely in there. Number 2, definitely ethos. We're using a celebrity or an athlete or a well-known person to promote a brand or promote a product. And for here, they're using Rodney Jones to promote their protein bars. Number 3, if it's not obvious from the bar graph on there, I know it doesn't look super credible or resourceful, but it is technically logos. It's got facts and figures. It's got a bar graph. It says 2 times the meat of the leading brand. It's facts, it's figures, it's logic, it's reason, it's logos. Then number 4, certified heart healthy by the American Heart Association. We've got ethos right there again. They're saying, hey, look, the American Heart Association says that our soup is good, so you should buy it because they think it's good. We're trustworthy. They trust us. An example of ethos, appealing to the character of their reader or audience. And so advertisements are some of the most obvious examples of ethos, pathos, and logos because, again, these are persuasive techniques. They're trying to get you to either do something or buy something or act a certain way, and they use ethos, pathos, logos to do this. This is also primarily used in writing, which is the activity you're going to be doing for eLearning today. So take a look at the example below. Which statement primarily appeals to logos or reason to support the position that multitasking is a necessary skill in the 21st century? So before we even look at the answers, let's look at what we need to see in order to answer correctly. So we need to think about 2 different things. We need to think which one of these is an example of logos specifically, and does it support the position that multitasking is a necessary skill in the 21st century? So we need to be thinking of both of those things, not just one or the other. So again, thinking of 2 things, which is an example of logos, and does it support the position that I'm supposed to be answering? So let's look at the options. Although some researchers note that multitasking is at times counterproductive, the necessity of multitasking in our high-speed, high-pressure world still remains. Or, like most office workers, I often find myself juggling phone calls, chat messages, and emails simultaneously, making multitasking an essential skill. Pause and think, which one of those is an example of logos to support the position? Hopefully you've had enough time. If you said the top one, you would be correct. Although some researchers note that multitasking is at times counterproductive, the necessity of multitasking in our high-speed, high-pressure world remains. This is definitely an example of logos. It says, although some researchers, first things first, facts, figures, experts, researchers, shows that it's logo, logic, reason, studies, facts, evidence, all of that can be summed up into the word researcher. It also provides the counterclaim. Remember that I said logos, sometimes an example of logos is to provide the counterclaim or the opposite opinion. and to like counter it, be like, yeah, I know you might think the opposite of me, but here's why you're wrong. And they do that here. It says, although some researchers note that multitasking is counterproductive, the necessity of it in our high-speed, high-pressure world remains. So they give you the counter. They give you the opposite thought to say like, hey, look at me. I've got a backup. I know how to prove that I'm right. So that is definitely logos. And so what you're going to do to practice this is log into iExcel, search skill code CEQ, and complete the skill to a SMART score of 100. There's nothing to submit here on Canvas. I will put this grade manually in Skyward. So what I do is I open iExcel and I get to, as a teacher, I get to type in CEQ, and then I click our class, and then it shows me how many of you have started it, and if you've started it, what your score is, your most recent score. So please be sure to do that. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Alrighty, good luck.